There is a kind of tiredness that doesn't come from the cleaning or the cooking. It comes from the invisible decisions, the mental load. A few months ago, I started exploring Japanese home philosophies, and something unexpected happened. Almost every idea felt strangely familiar. Decluttering, intention, simplicity, and before long, I found myself thinking about the homes I grew up in. We were already doing this. We just didn't have the words. This shelf didn't look messy. If you walked into the room, you probably wouldn't notice anything wrong with it. Everything was stacked neatly, nothing was falling over, nothing looked out of place. But that's the funny thing about clutter. The most exhausting clutter isn't always visible, because hidden behind these neat piles were clothes we no longer wore, things my child had outgrown months ago, and items I kept moving from one corner to another because I wasn't ready to make a decision. And over time, those small decisions I avoided started taking up space in my mind too. That's when I came across a Japanese concept called Danshari. Danshari has three simple ideas. Dan, refuse what no longer belongs. Sha, to release what no longer serves you. And Re, to detach from the emotional hold of possessions. Simple in theory, but much harder in practice. So I pulled everything out onto the floor because once everything was visible, I couldn't ignore it anymore. This was the hardest part for me. Every item seemed to come with a story, a memory, or a reason to keep it just in case. But I noticed something interesting. The moment I let go of the first item, the next decision became easier, and then the next. What felt impossible at the beginning slowly turned into momentum. One by one, the unnecessary things left the room. By the time I finished, only the things that truly served a purpose remained. Everything was visible and accessible. Nothing was hiding, and that was the real transformation. The shelf felt lighter, but more importantly, I felt lighter. Because Danshari isn't really about creating an empty home. It's about creating space for the life you're living right now. Dan-sha-ri. Refuse, release, detach. Three simple words that turned one ordinary shelf into a reminder that sometimes the easiest way to make room for something new is to let go of what has already served its purpose. My entryway was already organized. The shoes had a place, the keys had a place, everything worked. I'd come home, slip off my shoes, drop my keys, and move on. That's what made the Japanese idea of the Genkan so interesting to me. A Genkan is a traditional Japanese entryway, a transition between the outside world and the home. And honestly, this is not new for us in India. We remove our footwear before entering our homes and temples. We have done it for generations. But what I loved wasn't the act itself, it was the intention behind it. So today, instead of changing the space, I added a little more meaning to it. As a renter, there's only so much I can do. Our shoes stay under the stairs, but I added this colorful South Indian chamakalam rug and a small basket for socks, which also makes it easier to gather them all when it's time to do laundry. Nothing dramatic, just a familiar habit practiced with a little more intention, a small pause between the world outside and the home within. To think about it, running a home efficiently is not all that different from running an organization. That's why I love the Japanese concept of 5S. A simple system built around 5 steps: sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. And honestly, my spice drawer is probably the best example of it. The setup already worked, small glass jars, everything in one place. But over time, a few jars had emptied out, some needed refilling, and the drawer was due for a reset. The first step is sort. Take everything out and see exactly what you're working with. Empty jars, duplicates, things that no longer need to be there. Then comes set in order, not by category, but by use. The spices I reach for every day stay at the front. The ones I use occasionally can sit further back. Next is shine, the quick wipe of the cabinet, the jars, and the corners that don't usually get attention. Nothing complicated, but it instantly makes the space feel fresh again. I am also going to use this time to refill all my empty jars. And I have noticed that when a space is clean, you're naturally more motivated to keep it that way. Refilling the jars, cleaning off the spice dust, and putting everything back neatly makes the whole cooking process feels much smoother. The next step in the 5S method is standardize. Every jar has a designated spot. So the next time I'm cooking, I don't have to think about where things belong. There is no searching, no rearranging, and no decision making in the middle of a busy meal. And finally, sustain, the most important step. Because 5S isn't about organizing once, it's about creating a system that's easy to maintain. That's why you see me adding the masala spoons into a small glass jar here, so everything is in one space and I am not navigating across the kitchen. And that's probably why 5S fits so naturally into an Indian home. The goal is simple: make everyday life easy.
Alexa, add sesame seeds to the shopping list. I added sesame seeds to the shopping list.
One of my favorite Japanese ideas is Wabi-Sabi, the belief that beauty exists in imperfection, simplicity, and the marks left behind by time. And when I think of Wabi-Sabi, I immediately think of Indian handicrafts and family heirlooms. So I styled this space using things that already mean something to me. I'm using a handmade kalamkari dupatta as a table covering. What I love about kalamkari is that it doesn't try to be perfect. The hand-drawn details, the slight variations, and the little imperfections are exactly what make it beautiful. Then I added this beautiful brass vilakku that belongs to my mum. It's more than decor. It's a piece of family history carrying memories from one home to the next. And that's what Wabi-Sabi is really about. Not chasing perfection or filling a space with new things, but appreciating the beauty that already exists around us. A handcrafted fabric, a treasured heirloom, objects that become more meaningful with age. Nothing elaborate, yet together they create a warmth that feels timeless. And to me, that is Wabi-Sabi. Kaizen is a Japanese philosophy that means continuous improvement, not a complete transformation, not a dramatic before and after, just small improvements repeated consistently over time. And for me, this room is where I practice Kaizen the most. Every morning after the kids leave, I come in for a quick reset. Something needs putting away, a few toys have wandered across the room. Nothing major, just the evidence of a childhood being lived. The reset usually takes about 15 minutes, but the time isn't really the point. The point is to show up consistently. Because Kaizen isn't about waiting until things become a problem. It's about making small corrections before they become big ones. And over time, something interesting starts to happen. You stop simply tidying the room. You start noticing patterns. Maybe the books are always ending up in the same corner. Maybe certain toys never make it back to the shelf. Maybe a storage solution that looked good on day one isn't actually working in real life. The room starts telling you what needs to change, and little by little, you improve the system. That's the beauty of Kaizen. Small actions reveal better solutions. And on most days, a simple 15-minute reset is all it takes to keep the room functioning the way it is meant to. Not perfect, just a little better than yesterday. Ichigo, Ichie is a Japanese phrase that translates to one time, one meeting. It's the idea that every moment is unique, and once it passes, it can never be experienced in quite the same way again. And I can't think of a better way to talk about it than through these summer blooms. A flower in the garden is constantly changing. The bloom I'm admiring today won't look exactly like this tomorrow. A petal may unfurl, a color may soften, another flower may take its place. And that's what makes it beautiful. Not because it lasts forever, but because it doesn't. I think that's why I love spending time in the garden this time of the year. It reminds me to pay attention, to notice what's blooming right now instead of waiting for something bigger or better. And whenever I can, I like bringing a little bit of that beauty indoors. A few cut flowers in the kids' room, nothing elaborate, just a small reminder of this particular morning. And perhaps that's what Ichigo, Ichie is really asking us to do, to notice the beauty of a moment while we are still living it. And finally, Ikigai. It is often translated as a reason for being, but I think that makes it sound much bigger than it needs to be. Because Ikigai isn't always about finding your life's purpose. Sometimes it's simply the thing that makes you look forward to a day, a small ritual, a quiet pleasure, a moment that belongs entirely to you. For me, on most mornings, it's this: opening the curtains and letting the sunlight in, fresh flowers on the table, lighting an incense and letting its familiar fragrance drift through the room. The aroma of filter coffee filling the air, and those few uninterrupted minutes before the day gathers speed. I don't do this because I have to. I do it because these small rituals make ordinary days feel meaningful, and I have noticed that happiness often lives in these tiny moments, not in the milestones, not in the things we are constantly chasing, but in the simple routines we return to again and again. A warm cup of coffee, the gentle scent of incense, a patch of sunshine on the floor, a quiet home, a moment of stillness before the day begins. Maybe that's my Ikigai. Not something grand, just a few small things that make my everyday life feel rich. As I explored these Japanese ideas, I realized something unexpected. None of them felt completely unfamiliar. Danshari reminded me of letting go. Genkan reflected the respect we have always shown for our homes. 5S felt like the systems we have been practicing every day. Wabi-Sabi celebrated handmade beauty and cherished heirlooms. Kaizen showed up in the small daily resets that keep a home running. Ichigo, Ichie reminded me to notice the beauty of ordinary moments, and Ikigai helped me appreciate the simple rituals that make life meaningful. Different words, different cultures, yet so many shared values. That's what I loved most about this journey. Not discovering something entirely new, but finding new ways to appreciate what was already there. Thank you for spending this day with me. And now I'm going to sit back, enjoy my coffee, and soak in a little more of this morning sunshine. See you soon.